You have a talk that was for a conference, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that topic.
Yes, due to the current COVID crisis, the conference got canceled. So not sure when I will be able to give that talk, but I definitely can share some of the talk was going to talk about how storage referral program is being built and how we went from a simple system that's more like, oh, if you click on a link, then to register on our platform, then you will be able to get some credit if the link is sent through an existing user. But then, since we're a distributed system, we have to consider, how to keep track of users' credits across different nodes, across different regions, and things suddenly got more complicated than we intended, which made the project from, as we estimate at first, to be maybe 1 or 2 months of the project time. It eventually became a 4 months to 6 months development time. And that's something that I feel it's not very commonly talked about, especially for someone who is in their early career. That a lot of times, usually junior engineers really wants to just get a ticket or get a problem and then immediately start coding, and usually don't really like to spend a lot of time during design phase. But that this talk is about talking about that my experience, how I started from oh, this is a simple problem, let's just code, to okay, we really need to sit down and think about the design, think about the bigger picture before we actually start to write code.
Why do you think people resist that design? I think we've all done it. What's the resistance there?
I think it's, at least to me, right? I am not going to speak for everyone else, but at least to me is because doing design itself is kind of, there's a lot of unknown before you start coding, right? Before you start actually writing down code. When you're writing down code, things become more concrete. But during design phases, things are very abstract. It's hard to make sense. It's hard to feel confident, to kind of give any concrete conclusion to problems. So I think that kind of abstract characteristic of design phase is kind of what scares me when I was doing it, because you don't know what you don't know, right? I think what has helped me to learn throughout that experience is that if there's too much unknown before you start coding, or if you are coding when there is still too much unknown, your code is going to become spaghetti code, because you will run into all different kind of edge cases, or you will write 100 lines of code, you complete a feature and turns out it doesn't even meet the business requirement in the first place. Then you basically just wasted days worth of work. So I would feel like now I would rather spend extra time to make sure that at least I understand the bigger picture. At least I have a kind of a sense of what exactly I'm trying to solve before I start coding. Because till the end of the day, it saves time, and that's really what the business want. The business want to have something done in the least amount of time possible.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you're saying that's something that people are particularly vulnerable to early in the career. Maybe because you feel the need to be busy, or you feel like as long as you're typing, you're making something, like you're being effective, and you kind of have some power over the situation because you're doing something. Whereas like maybe designing is seen as something where it's more passive when you're starting out. until like you've had a few rounds of spaghetti code and lived through that particular experience. Then maybe you start to change your mind. So
Yeah.
do you think that it sounds like as time goes by that you're feeling more confident with devoting enough time to design? Are you also starting to get a better sense over each project that you do of how much time you should spend in planning versus how much you should dive into coding? What do you think a good ratio is?
That's
And the,
definitely a tough call.
well, it is. And the reason I'm asking is because the bane of my existence as an engineer was always time estimates, right?
Yes.
Usually from someone who does not have to write the code. And they'll be like, how long is it going to take? And I'm like, oh, don't ask. uh, and it's particularly when you're new in your career, at least for myself, I found it very easy to get defensive where I'm like, back off, man. I'm a wizard. Like, you'll get it when you get it. And that is not a convincing business case, particularly when you're talking across team.
Mm-hmm.
So, so
Yeah,
like, is it proportional or is it just like like a fixed cost that you sort of just mark off this much time to do the things that you need to do?
I think for me, it obviously depends on the complexity of the problem. Even before the design for how we are going to implement the feature or implement a fix for a problem, the first thing that I tend to do is to try to understand the problem that I'm trying to solve itself before I even give an estimation. Because if I don't understand the problem itself, then I'm not able to even give any design or give any sort of estimation. And I feel like during that time that you are trying to understand the problem, of course, you will have questions to the business owner. Then during this discussion, this kind of back and forth, they will understand that whether the problem is complex or not. By like that kind of like automatically also give you a chance to prove that okay, this problem is actually kind of difficult. It's not going to be a two-line change and I can just get it done in one day. So I think to have a good communication funnel between the business owner and the engineer is something that will help to have a more accurate estimation for a particular task. But I don't have a fixed number in my mind.
Do you have an example of doing that recently on deletions? Have you had a time where you've had to estimate something and communicate that to a different stakeholder and work that into your design process?
I think what I like about storage, at least on the engineering side, when we work on things, is that I think the business really trusts the engineer that, we're not just sitting here and watching TV all day. We're actually trying to solve the problem. It's not that we are trying to, slack off and not making progress. The problem is hard. So I don't really have to give too much estimation myself lately, at least for the deletion, because as a cloud storage, the delete is one of our core functionality. We definitely don't want to, break our core feature. So we want to make sure that we're doing things right and we're only improving, not making things worse for our user. So I appreciate the business trust that we're trying our best to make as much progress as we can. And I hope, the business side just in general would have more trust in their engineering team just in general in other companies as well.
Yeah, I would agree. And I do also agree that once you have that as part of the fabric of the company, it makes everything go faster because you don't have to make the same argument over and over again. It's just sort of like, okay, like we trust you, you know what you're doing, we all want the same thing. Obviously, like you said, deletion is pretty central to the product. So we definitely would have a hard time convincing people of the value of a storage platform that you couldn't actually delete anything from. So, so you're blessed in that regard. And I guess just finally, out of curiosity, what's your favorite part of what you do?
I think my favorite part is I at storage, I always have the chance to work on things that's out of my limit. I think that that's something that really excites me because if I already know how to solve a problem, that's more like a chore. There's no, there's no, there's nothing interesting there. Just like but if I get to work on constantly working on things that I have no idea about, that's completely out of my comfort zone, then of course I feel scared and kind of the imposter syndrome jumps out of me pretty hard at the beginning. But then when I actually get to solve the problem in the end, the kind of the kind of like what's the word? I suddenly blanked. There's a word for it. The satisfaction coming from solving something that I just didn't have any knowledge of before is enormous, and that's something that I really enjoy.
Thanks, Yingrong. I'm so happy that we got to talk today, and I hope we can do this again sometime soon.
Me too. Thanks.
All right, have a good one.
You too.
All right, everyone, this has been Tardigrade Thursday. Thanks, and I'll see you next week.